Let's be real, modern dating sometimes feels like it needs a user manual.
Men and women approach commitment very differently.
Why am I not dating Kendall Jenner?
Okay,
How do I get to Kendall Jenner?
For women, be as delusional as Joe.
Yeah, be as delusional.
When you go on a first date, you want to feel like you're across from someone who it's kind of like a play date. You have the crack, right? Which is banter. It's like the rapport. American men, I feel like, don't have the crack.
Welcome back to the First Rounds on Me, a First Rounds on Media production. Today we're shaking things up and diving deep into the wild world of dating theories because let's be real, modern dating sometimes feels like it needs a user manual. And who better to help us decode it all than Sydney Meister, associate lifestyle editor at Pure Wow and co-host of Cupid's Corner, where she turns hours of dating research into digestible TikTok-worthy wisdom. We're talking box theory, are you dateable or just a situationship placeholder? Cartier versus Knockoff, are you the real deal or giving discount energy? And the 80-20 rule. Should you really stop initiating? Should you really stop initiating to see who steps up? Plus, we'll unpack why Gen Z is ditching dating apps for Instagram DMs and whether Soonacorns, which cannot wait to get into that, aka guys with potential, are actually worth the investment or just another bad stock pick. Sydney, welcome to the show.
That was like a crazy intro. I loved it.
Thank you very much.
Like my whole portfolio.
We always go
blurb.
We always go back and forth about the intros. Joe's like, make it shorter, and I'm like, I like them a little bit longer. So I think I've just got better at saying them.
You got better at saying them, but while you were saying it, I was like, this is long.
See?
No, I mean,
But
I was hanging on to every. What do you mean? We love them,
which is why it's going to stay. The problem is that your listeners, we're not a huge podcast, right? So if like Call Her Daddy was doing a huge intro, people are like, oh, cool, like can't wait to get to the show. With us, they're probably like, I don't know who these two are, who the guest is. I'm out.
No one listens to the first like 2 minutes.
The people jump over it anyway. They're like, who is this? Okay, sweet. And then
you're settling in, you're doing your thing. Like you don't really get into it.
As long as you're happy with it, then we're happy with it.
I mean,
I'm no offense, listeners out there, but like I'm really truly thinking about the guest when we're here in the studio. But we start off every podcast by asking our guest this: are you single? Are you dating? Are you engaged? Are you married? Where are you?
I am single.
Love it.
I'm single, always dating.
Yeah.
Research, part of my job to go on the dates, but yeah, as of right now, single.
That's why. So does that make dating easier, harder, more experimental?
It fucks with your head. Like I had a professor in college, I studied film, and they were like, you're going to be messed up for a little bit. You're not going to look at movies the same. But then after the course, you're going to feel like a whole new appreciation for them. That's kind of how I feel about dating, where it's like, I'll be in the middle of writing a story and then going on a date. And I'm like, okay, shit, I can't talk about this with this person. I don't know him. And then after the date, I'm like, oh, but maybe that applies. Like maybe there's something there. So I don't know. It's like a weird personal to external factor.
I feel like a specific part of your brain is always in like overdrive, like trying to figure out like walking that line between personal and professional, which is I think something like so many people can relate to, but that is so specific.
I don't sleep.
But don't you think there's a part of you that forces yourself to be single for content? Because if you're in a really healthy relationship, that's great for you, but it's boring for content.
Okay, so I will say being a writer, you're never a great writer if you're happy. Like you never really,
same thing with
you
all
have
artists.
to be somewhat miserable. So I feel like part of that, it helps. Like the more miserable I am, the better the story is. But eventually I'd like to be a person.
So you break up with a guy and be like, listen, this is just going so well. My career's tanking. We have to break up.
I'll just be like, you know what? I think you're great. There's a lot here, but I have my goals are bigger than this.
You need your big.
Yeah.
Carrie Bradshaw. Maybe Carrie Bradshaw was just always miserable because she was such a great writer.
You know what? I think that Big and Carrie would have never ended up together.
Agreed.
Ever.
I loved her and Aiden. I know, I think he was a little bit too soft and like a little bit too whatever, but I think the balance was nice.
I have a whole thing about Aiden. I have a whole thing.
Who's
I think
Aiden?
Okay, Aiden.
You can't even talk about the show if you don't know who Aiden is, first and foremost.
I know the big players.
Aiden Shaw. My whole thing, I think every single girl needs an Aiden, right? Where it's like, he's the best. He's giving you everything you want, but it's not your guy. And there's like this underlying guilt that you have because you're like, why am I not more in love with him? Why is he not my person? Like, I feel like
that's actually a very wise
So Aiden's
Opposite.
kind of like the safe, nice guy, but there's not the oomph there.
Okay, now we're jumping into it because I was thinking about this today for a story. I had met a bunch of Irish lads and
Irish lads.
yeah, they all say they're like lad. I met a bunch of lads and they have, you have the crack, right? Which is banter. It's like the rapport. American men, I feel like, don't have the crack.
As an American man, I totally agree with you.
They don't have the crack. They don't have like, I've gone on so many boring dates where it's just like, you feel like you're in an interview because they're not building that like little teasing.
Not making fun of you. Like
right.
The see if you have thick skin or not.
Right. Like I grew up where it's like all of my guy friends, my family, we're evil to each other. We eviscerate each other. And that's warm to me. Like that feels like home. I feel like a lot of people dating now are very afraid to hurt each other's feelings.
Hannah uses a good term for these types of men. I think you and your friends call them too vanilla.
Yeah.
Just too like,
vanilla.
What is it?
Vanilla.
Too vanilla.
just too like safe and plain.
Mhm.
But I have to say, I went through the ringer with all my Australian friends when I lived in New York.
Mm.
So if I had not been friends with them before I met her, I don't think we would have got on
I
because
think-
I hated banter. I was
think-
like, you guys are dicks. Like,
No, I think it would have just
why
taken you a
sticks?
lot longer
Really?
to
You're from
understand.
Staten Island.
Staten Island's got its own.
No, but you have your own version of banter. That's why, like, glad that you said it because when I first met your family and the way in which you speak to each other and like your larger family and your larger friends, you guys take the piss out of each other.
Yeah.
all the
I mean,
time.
it's like a version of sarcasm, which
It's
I guess is
banter.
banter.
It
But
is.
the banter that Australians and Irish and English people have, it's more
Fight.
intellectual.
Yes.
It like bites you, and you're like, is
That's
that real
my
or not
vibe,
real?
though. Like, that's my, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
feel like the best thing that you could do if you're a guy is blend, show that you're intelligent, and also show that you're fun.
Mhm.
I was insecure about that because I was with these guys and they were so good at like being witty,
Quick.
and girls loved it. And I was like, am I an idiot? Because I don't know how to do this.
I think it's an art form. Like, I think it's genuinely something where if you're a guy, like, ask your friends to bully you for a day and see how it goes. I go on a podcast.
So my friend's line,
friends
which
to
I
bully
thought
you.
was so cheesy. So he'd meet a girl and she'd be like, oh, you know, like what brought you here? Right. And every time I go outside, I'd roll my eyes and he'd go, oh, a Boeing 747. And I'm just like, dude, like such the cheesiest, stupidest line. And the girl's like, ah, like in his Australian accent.
A girl finds that, like, I would be like, what? I see, that would be my opportunity to be mean.
Yeah, but
give him
that'd be mean back.
Yeah.
But it
Also-
just like starts this fire, and I'm just like, he just says the simplest, stupid, smartest thing in the moment.
Yeah.
However, you have to also take into account the Australian accent, right?
Yeah, of course.
True.
That you can say the
That is
stupidest shit.
true.
I have personally done this. Said the stupidest shit, and people are like, "Oh my god, that's incredible."
What did you say today? We were at the doctor, and she called me darling, and she's like, "Oh my god, he
can't
calls
believe
you
you
darling," and I'm like,
Just look at it's so
what?
sweet. And it's like the most simplistic thing. And so it's like you really have to take into account the accent when it comes along to it. But I wholeheartedly agree. Like in dating, if I was on a first date, obviously pre-Joe, and there wasn't that good banter, that wasn't that good back and forth. And like it doesn't have to be like you don't have to immediately step into it, but like there has to be a ramp up period. And if it wasn't there, then that was like nail in the coffin.
Well, this is another, because now I'm formulating. I was already had my pitches due, so this was very timely of what I'm going to write about next. I was already thinking about this idea of play. And it's like, when you go on a first date, a really great first date, you want to feel like you're across from someone who it's kind of like a play date.
Mhm.
And then you're going to have a sleepover with your friend and, you know, maybe do some other stuff. But I feel like we lose that a little bit and we kind of go into it like it's an interview and you go on a first date and you're like, will they be a good provider? Are they stable? I wouldn't worry about that until 9 dates in.
yeah, I usually say the fourth date. I have 3 rules for a first date to go to a second date. You're attracted to them,
Mhm.
they were nice to you, and you had a good time.
Yeah.
Like that, there should be the markers of like what makes you want to have a second date. And like, you're so true. We see it all of the time when we talk to people, when we talk to single people, whether it be at events or just like through the app. And they're so stringent with themselves. They put so much pressure on those first dates and they wonder to themselves why they're not enjoying the process.
I feel like also part of it is like so much of dating is just horrible. So much of it is rejection and, you know, worrying about yourself and how people are going to view you. And it's like the moment pockets that you can fill of having some fun and enjoying the presence of just another person.
Yeah.
Is like very simple, and it can make a date interesting and fun, or it can make it brutal and you're sitting there and you can't wait to leave.
I loved first dates. I was so excited to just
I love
meet
first
somebody who I could ask a million questions to. And if that was stale, I would be like, okay, I know this isn't going anywhere. But I just had so much to say. And when her and I went on our first date, I think we spent like 5 hours talking. And our waiter was just like, you guys have been here for hours. You need to order food. We were like, sorry, we're just talking.
I think that should be the golden rule. Like if you are not closing down the restaurant with your first date, it's probably not that great. Like if you're cutting it off at 2.5 hours, you're probably like, okay, I'm going to go and watch my show.
100%.
Well, have you had all of these things where like these, I mean, and each to their own, like never there to disparage anybody, but like there are like dating coaches, there are people that say, hey, listen, go into a first date and you have a hard out in 45 minutes.
I hate that.
Just 45 minutes. But then when you talk about relating it back to job interviews, that's exactly what it feels like.
Right.
So you're putting a time limit on the fun that you can have, on the joy that you can have of meeting somebody new. Like it doesn't make any sense to me.
I think it's also like if we're talking about first dates, like curiosity, making a person, you're sitting across from someone, make them feel like a person. Like make them feel like, okay, you're not just like a box or something that I'm filling in my calendar.
Just like a little notch to be able to say, okay, I've gone on this many dates this week. At least I've dated intentionally. Like you actually haven't.
No.
It's so bizarre. And then it also, we had the Max Cohen, who you know, which is so strange. What a small
hi,
bloody
Max.
world.
We went to camp together.
That's
like
great.
I'm surprised he hasn't done a skit about me because he does a skit where it's like this color war captain who's just a raging bitch. And that was me for like 5 days. He was on my team. I probably just gave him an idea.
I was about to say he probably just did, but he's like a legend. But he said something on the podcast and he was like, when on a first date, when people can ask questions and listen at the same time, and there's like that back and forth, that's the most delicious thing on a first date. And I couldn't agree more. Like that flow of what's going on.
You don't want to just be like spitting out facts.
No.
You want to actually be engaging in a conversation where you're listening to the person and then you're thinking, okay, they left something hanging. Where can I pick it up and take it from there? Like that's the whole fun of it, where you're getting in each other's brains.
And I think a green flag for that is whenever I'm really excited, I was, like you said, right? We're having a podcast and there's 3 people. So we're all talking. You're trying to collect all those nuggets, those low hanging fruit, and you forget what you're going to say because there's so many of them. And if somebody says, oh, shit, I forgot what I was going to say, I think that's a green flag because they're just so excited. They want to say so many things, but they just can't control
Well,
it.
I think it's the unbuttoned nature of it, right? So like when someone is like vulnerable enough to be like, oh shit, fuck, I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Or like they spill food on themselves or like, and they laugh it off. It's like, it's that vulnerability and that lack of taking yourself so seriously that then in turn creates a really good first date. It's when people are so buttoned up, and whether that's like in the physical space of being on the date or whether that's with like the list of questions that they come in with or that time limit, like all of those things kind of come into play. And so I think the lesson from this little segment is to basically just relax.
Yeah.
Just
I
enjoy
think
yourself.
enjoy just talking to someone.
What's a good first date for you?
A good first date for me. Okay, I could be a little harsh. Like I could be a little hard. I'm not everyone's cup of tea.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning like I'm a big personality. I'm not, I don't censor myself too much. And like I say it like it is. And I feel like for me, a good first date is someone who's not afraid to like go there. And I mean, this sounds bad, but put me in my place a little bit.
Okay.
Like I don't know everything. I just pretend like I do. And I feel like a good first date is someone who's willing to question it a little bit, have fun with it. Like kind of gets my vibe that
also
I
match
talk
your
a lot.
strength as well. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to go into a situation where like you feel overbearing or you feel too strong because the other person is not kind of like stepping up to the plate.
Right.
You want someone to like have that, like that kind of goes back to banter, but it goes back to like the flow of the energy of what's going on.
I feel like this is also something I really learned later in my 20s, where it was like in my earlier 20s, I was almost afraid to like go there with people. You don't want to step on anyone's toes. Then you date for a while and then you start writing about dating and then your whole life is fucking dating. And I feel like I just kind of got to the point where it's like, show up as yourself.
Mhm.
If they don't like you, if you're not their cup of tea, you're someone else's. Like you don't need to mold yourself into someone else, but I do think it's worth being curious.
Heck yeah.
100%.
Yeah. All
I
right.
used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time you'd find someone who you were super attracted to or was, cool, you'd try and make yourself different to cater to them. And then eventually you're just like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like I sound ridiculous.
Right. Well, also it's like I hate people who say I'm an open book, like I'm coming as I am, because the first date, any kind of first interaction, you wear a kind of mask. You can't help it.
You're putting your absolute best foot forward.
Right. You want them to like you. You want them to see you a certain way. But I also feel like letting go of that a little bit and just being like, all right, this is what it is. It's just two people hanging out, talking. It takes the pressure off a little bit.
Couldn't agree more.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to dive into these series?
Okay, let's
I'm
do
just
series.
like so fascinated by them.
I'm like,
and I'm
could put my hair up.
Yep. Feet up, hair up.
Okay.
We're getting comfy. All right. So I'm curious to see actually if you've heard of
Did you
a
make
lot of
these up?
This is Cindy.
Okay.
This is purely from Cindy's
Hannah does
writing.
a segment which I love, but it's dating terms decoded,
Oh,
and
God.
nobody ever gets them because she's just like,
That's not true at all. People get them.
They're so
second
hard.
of all, Soonacorn, which is something that did you coin that?
I coined that.
As
That's
soon-
my favorite story.
That's why I
I've
was
ever
like,
read.
Sydney
what is
gets
it called?
me. A Soonacorn. We'll get into it later.
Soonacorn.
Okay,
Just shush.
we'll get there. We'll get there.
As
He
a-
doesn't know.
It's a man that does not do any research. Just shush and come along for the ride.
He doesn't
All
know.
right. So this is all from Sydney's writing. Like everything that we've done here today, that we're going to talk about here today, is something that Sydney has written about, which is that's why it's so
Okay,
fascinating.
so you're saying I have to be nice. You're saying don't make fun of these things.
Such a fucking
You can make fun of them.
Okay, so
I make fun of them when I'm writing them.
He's such a fucking smartass. We're going to talk about the box theory because I thought that this is super interesting. And I believe, was it first coined by Tinks or like it kind of like really blew up by Tinks?
I was going to
Yep.
say I've heard of it.
You love
Has
Tinks,
to be
right?
from
So
Tinks.
Yeah.
in your article, you delve into the box theory in dating, which suggests to the people out there that men categorize women into 3 distinct boxes: those they want to date, those they want to sleep with, and those they have no interest in. You also posit that once a man places a woman into one of those categories, it's very challenging for her to move from one box to another. How did you first stumble upon this theory?
So I heard about that. Like this blew up on TikTok. I think it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And the way that our stories are kind of situated, they'll take a TikTok theory and they'll be like, okay, can we apply this to a psychologist? Can we apply this to any kind of theoretical framework that already exists? So my whole fascination with this is that, you're in 3 boxes, which is the moment that this guy sees you, your girlfriend, your wife, I love you, I want to marry you. The second is like, okay, I definitely want to sleep with you. I don't know if I'm going to move you into that next box. And then the third is I want nothing to do with you. The second box, which ties into situationships, is like the whole murk of dating, which is why do I feel this chemistry with this guy? Why do I feel this connection? And why is he not giving me commitment? And my take on the theory, well, actually, let me ask you, because I think the guy is very different from the girl here. When you guys met, were you immediately like, that's going to be my wife?
I immediately thought she was beautiful. And while I thought that, I simultaneously didn't think that I wanted to sleep with her. So
Bird?
no, but,
No,
I'm
that
joking.
means,
but
then
it's not
the
like I
answer
saw you
was
and I was like, oh,
yeah.
I can't wait to sleep with this person, because I agree with these. I didn't know about these 3 boxes until just now, and I agree with them. So once we started having a conversation, then I immediately shifted into I could marry this person. She would be my girlfriend.
I think if a guy is asking to take you home on a first date, you're probably not going to make it to the 3rd box. Like, I think that guys get a little bit intimidated if they really like someone. They're not going to like put all the moves out on the first date if they want something long term, right?
I think there's just a lot of pressure on guys to perform on a first date. So yeah, like, I don't know.
But also, I feel like you have kind of like like reiterate that sentiment of what you said, is like if a man doesn't really take you that seriously, and again, this is a blanket statement, it's not pertaining to every single male out there. They don't really take you that seriously, then they're going to be more likely to be like, hey, come back to my place, right? But if they take you seriously, it's kind of the same thing that I did. Like, we didn't sleep with each other on our first date,
Right.
and we both kind of like actively made that decision, even though we were very, very attracted to each other, because we knew that there was longevity here, and we didn't want to not taint it, but just like rush into something, because the emotional connection was so like delicious and like hot that we didn't want to then taint it in any way, shape, or form with the physical connection just yet.
I feel like delicious, that's like the best way to describe it. Like, you almost want to prolong
it's delayed gratification.
Yeah, you almost want to let it linger a little bit.
And it's like not everybody gets access to this,
Right.
which I liked. So when I met her and
Cartier watch.
we were having a really deep conversation about everything, and she was explaining to me, her career, and I was like, oh wow, you were big time, and
You were a model, right?
I was a model for a long time.
and then if I kind of slept with her, not to put myself down, but it's like, okay, if I could sleep with you on the first date, how special really is
Flip
this?
the cards. Flip the cards. We're moving from theory to theory because I just wrote about this. All right.
But it's true.
No, say it.
But
Bring it
that's
as
my
it's done.
perspective.
We're simpatico right
we really
now.
are. You have no idea.
Uh-huh. Okay, so another story I just wrote, Cartier watch theory.
And I just want
But wait, back
I'm
to
not
the three
gonna refer to it 'cause
boxes.
it's so janky, but yeah.
I
Okay.
I
right here,
strongly agree with the three boxes.
Yeah.
At least from my point of view. Yeah, it's definitely. I think if you want to sleep with someone right away, you're not as attracted to them, if that makes sense.
Guys lose it.
Yeah, we did.
It's just like
yeah.
so physical, where it's like, okay, I don't even care about how smart you are or care about you as a person, just your physical persona.
But to Sydney's point, that's where the situationship and the things get really
100%.
murky.
We'll get it. Okay, move it. We'll go back to
Yeah.
Cartier watch because I feel like box one is Cartier watch.
Yes.
So we could tie that in. The second, what we're talking about, the situationship
Mhm.
box. I wouldn't even say that it's so much about the physical as it is like, and I feel like this is just a gendered thing where
Yeah.
women tend to be a lot more confused by why there's not commitment when it's really good chemistry and it's really good connection. And I feel like part of that has to do with the fact that men and women approach commitment very differently. And for men, it has a lot to do with timing, and it has a lot to do with where you are in life. Where for women, I feel like we hit 21 and we're like, if we meet the guy.
Well, I think we're nowhere near as rigid with like the timelines of our life, and we're like, I know for a fact that you can relate to this, because if we had met when you were 27 and I was 27, because we're the exact same age, there's no way in hell that we would.
Yeah, but that's not a timeline that I wanted.
No,
but I think no.
Okay.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think when a guy meets somebody who he thinks could be his wife or his partner, he does not care where he is in life. It's more, we don't commit in a situationship because our gut and our mind are telling us this is good, but something out there is great, and I want something great. When you meet somebody who's a potential wife or girlfriend, it's a very rare feeling that a guy gets where he holds on to that and is like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can with this. If I had met you when I was 27, yeah, you wouldn't be with me because I was not where you would have wanted me to be. But if you told me,
you don't know that, but anyway.
Okay, I'm generalizing. But if you told me like, hey, I don't care where you are with your career, I don't care how emotionally intelligent you are, I think we're going to get married. I'd be like, okay, great. I wouldn't be like, no, I'm 27, so I don't want to get married now.
Well, but then it's kind of feeds into something else. So like, and this is like our personal like story as well. We met, we like almost fell in love with each other. He basically told me that he loved me on our second date, right? Like it was like really rapid. And then those feelings were so overwhelming to him that he pulled back, and and then he tried to break up with me, and I was like, well,
oh yeah,
I tried, and I say tried because
you're all
my
like, guy friends.
Yeah,
you
know
guys
what I mean?
should all hang out.
There's more to that.
That's a very simplified version of it, but I was more so like, just like, well, why? Like, I'm confused, and it kind of feeds into that second box where women are going, well, we have all this chemistry, all this connection that's there, but you're either pulling back or you're not meeting me at this place with with commitment. What's going on? And so maybe fear is also something that kind of comes into play for men.
So I'm trying to think back to, I wish I should have printed these out of what I actually wrote because I write so many of these. I'm trying to think back to what the therapist, Okay, one of the therapists I consulted said something really interesting where she was like, there was a study done where they gave a group of people pictures of strangers and they asked them to make judgments based on their appearance, based on their smile in like less than a second.
Snap.
Right. Every single person in this study, it didn't matter how much more time went on, they just got more affirmed in their initial perception of the person. So I feel like a lot of it has to do with our own perception of people.
Yeah.
And the confusion is like, okay, if you're a woman and your perception of this guy is perfect and they have everything that you're looking for, the guy, meanwhile, has whatever his, implicit bias is, you're at an impasse. Like you're at a point where it's like one person is viewing you like you're a box one, the other person still isn't sure. And it's very difficult to change that initial judgment.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
I want to move on to Cartier versus Knockoff.
Yeah.
I found that to be such an interesting.
What is it, Cartier versus Knockoff?
Yeah. Explain.
Okay, so I have to preface, I did not come up with this theory. This was Margarita. Margarita, if you're watching this, you have the best theories ever and I love you. I'm writing about bored uncle theory today. So she came up with this theory where you are either the Cartier watch or the Knockoff in your relationship. And I'm paraphrasing the example she gave, but imagine you're on the Upper East Side. You walk into an antique vintage shop. You see this Cartier watch. It is the craziest thing you've ever seen. It's one of a kind. It's $15,000. It's everything about it. It's just like gorgeous. But it's a big investment. So you think about it, you play with it, and then you're like, okay, I'll let you know. You give the guy your number at the store. Then the store manager starts calling you. He's calling you every day. And he's like, hey, are you going to buy this watch? And you're like, I don't know. Like, I'm thinking about it.
Fucking relax, bro.
Chill out. Then he calls you and he's like, okay, I'm going to give you a 10% discount on the watch. And you start thinking, is this even authentic? Like, is this a knockoff? Is this not real? The whole point of Cartier watch theory is that the second you dilute your brand, which is something that my dad says all the time to me, my dad will look at me and be like, don't dilute your brand. The second that you take yourself from what you deserve, what you really want, how you want to show up in a relationship and what you expect from someone, you're minimizing your value. And I feel like that ties into box theory so well because it's like, no matter how someone else sees you, they'll be the right buyer for your Cartier watch. Like you don't need to lessen it. You just need to hold out a little bit and I don't know, maybe give it on loan on the weekend and have some fun with it and look great. But I feel like that's the whole gist of it, right?
100%. No, 100%. You hit the nail on. I mean, you wrote it, but
I know. I'm like, did I miss anything? I wrote
So essentially you're saying though, everybody's a Cartier watch for someone.
Yeah.
Everyone is someone's Cartier watch. Everyone.
And I think when I was reading it, I thought it was just such a beautiful, I mean, it's a great analogy, but it's such a beautiful notion as well. The fact, and I think it again goes back into what we were saying earlier and what we talk about obsessively almost on this podcast is like the fact that people put so much pressure on themselves to like every single first date. And I will say even more particularly women are like, this has to be my husband. I'm at this age. I've got this going on. Like there's this checklist that I've got for myself and for this other person. And so when you embrace this Cartier lifestyle where you're like, all right, if I go on a first date and this fella doesn't like me, no worries. I'm not going to text him 45 different times. I'm not going to hound him. I'm not going to do all these things because that's going to dilute me as a human being because I'm incredible. The more you push into yourself and the more you go, the person who's meant for me will come at the right time, that calm energy then bleeds out to every area of your dating life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I simplify that with just being the lead character in your book. That's kind of what I always tell people.
So that's also a very similar thing, but I think this even ties more so back into like worth, right? And self-worth. And I think that's a really big thing. Like being the main character in your own play or your own book is great. But that's almost like pumping, like protecting your ego and kind of like that's the ego. Whereas I feel like this really lays into self-worth and self-worth is not directly tied to ego or not parallel.
Well, this is something like I was talking about this with my guy friends, and they hadn't even considered this, where I brought up the idea of biological clock. Like if I said that to you,
We
your
always talk about
biological,
that.
right?
I think it's a very important conversation that people are too scared to talk about.
So, but my guy friends, I this was a while ago that we had this conversation. We were maybe 24 at the time, so they weren't even thinking about that. But women already, the second that you're at graduating college, your clock is ticking, like the race is on. So I do feel like there is this biological factor that's happening where women do feel a pressure, like, okay, if I don't meet the person by the age, if I want to have kids, do I have to freeze them? And my whole thing is freeze them. Like freeze them. You know what I mean? It's an investment. I know everyone can't do it, but there are other ways to have kids. There are ways to have a family if you meet your partner later in life. You're not going to be any happier by settling down with someone just because you were worried you weren't going to find the right person in time.
And there shouldn't be any shame in taking your own future into your own hands.
Right.
100% agree. And I think women have more power in dating than men, but women's clock forces them to settle.
I think they give up their power.
Yeah,
I don't think
give up
they
their power with
realize it.
settling. And I think, I don't know why I was thinking about this last night, but you know how back in the day, people got married when they were like 22, 23. And I thought, and again, there's no science or facts behind this. This was just me thinking out loud. I thought, well, were people getting divorced so much because they were kids and then they stopped being a kid out of college and got married and had no time to figure out who they were, and they were doing that being married, and then at some point they thought, I never had a life, I'm just gonna get divorced. And I thought it's ironic that I think it's way better now where people are living their 20s and they're just figuring out who they really are, and then when they settle with somebody in their 30s, it's kind of somebody who they actually want. But I don't know if there's any divorce facts that back that up. I don't
think we have the statistics yet because we're not in our 60s, 70s, and we haven't.
Yeah, I
seen,
think
the divorce.
in today's world, people are actually marrying people that they want to marry, and they're not against traditions.
I think it's definitely more so than it used to be. Like to your point, back in the day, like you look at someone like my parents, never should have gotten married to begin with. But like my mum got pregnant at 19, and then they were like, oh, well, it's the way of the world. My dad's Catholic. All right, you got to get married. You got to have this. And then you go along this track, and then they get to their 50s and they're like, we fucking hate each other. You know what I mean? We never liked each other to begin with.
Flip side of it.
My mom and I, this is weird. My mom and I were talking about this, literally what you just said verbatim this morning, where she was like, you know, I just turned 27 last week. And
happy birthday.
Thanks. Thanks. I turned 27 last week, and you know, I always cry on my birthday. I've cried on my birthday since I was born, since my first birthday. I hate it. So this wasn't like a new thing for me, but I'm crying on my birthday. Me and my mom are at the restaurant in Saks, and I'm like hysterical at the bar. And she said to me, she was like, now is not the time. You're still a kid in a lot of ways in your 20s. Like you're still reconciling with who you are, what you want from someone else. And it's really hard to get what you need from someone if you're not giving it to yourself and you don't know what that even looks like. And you know, if we're talking about like our grandparents' age, it was a culture thing. Like now we live in a time where it's like, okay, you don't need to we're not in Handmaid's Tale. Like you don't need to pop out a kid and start your life. You can have things for yourself before you're ready to move on to the next phase.
And then also if you look at like the science and the statistics behind like the happiness of a mother and then the subsequent happiness of the children, because that mother has then gone out to be able to live her own life and filled her own cup up. Like you look at a lot of mothers, and like your mother's an anomaly, right? So that's all she ever wanted to do is be a mother and like apps, and she thrived at it, and it's gorgeous, and she like can't get enough of it to today.
Italian
mother.
But
then there are a lot of women back in the day who felt that was the only path forward for them. And then as they get into the 50s and 60s, they feel very unfulfilled, and it bleeds through to their family life and to their children. And so like there's nothing bad can come from women in particular taking the time to be able to fill their own cup and be selective about who you choose to be as a part of your life. Your mum is so wise in that regard. And like 27 is hard, because I remember when I was 27, I started to feel that biological clock, right? And I started to feel the pressure because you see 30 ahead of you. And we've always been, again, it goes back to like our parents' age of like 30 was like a marker, mate, like an absolute marker. It is not anymore. If anything, it's moved up 10 years and that marker has moved to 40, right?
We met at 30. Just
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we met at 30.
Right. Well, I feel like it's so hard because when you're at this age, half of you is like, I'm not ready at all for any of this stuff. Like, I cannot imagine my best friend since first grade just got engaged. She's planning a wedding. She asked me today, she was like, do I need a trombone? I was like, I am not equipped to answer your questions. I have no idea. So there's this like dichotomy of feeling really, you're at an age where you should be more mature and you should be doing these things. You have the biological clock, you have the societal pressure, but you don't feel ready for it. You're not there yet.
It's external pressure and then it's internal pressure because you're like, I don't feel ready for this, but maybe I should.
Maybe I should.
And then it's this constant back and forth. It's horrific.
But this is the problem with society. Why is it more mature to get married at 27 than live in New York City and experience different people and cultures and get smarter for the next 4 to 5 years?
Because that's not the way that society
I'm
is.
saying that's the problem with
Preaching
society.
to the choir.
100%.
Because I don't think one is better or worse than the other. One's not more mature or less mature. I think that's why I adore living in New York City, because 27, you're a baby.
You are.
I moved to New York City when I was 26. That was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, you're a baby and you could live in New York City at 57 and nobody blinks an eye. And you can meet somebody and you say, I'm 57. Oh, are you married? No, I'm single. That's cool.
Cool.
No one
normalized.
gives a shit because you could just be who you want to be here in New York City.
You also have to think about, though, like if we're talking about where it comes from, the role of a woman. Like, it's very different for men, you know what I mean? That was the whole archetype of like, you're going to work. And then when you have reached a financial level, you've reached a point in your life when you're ready to settle down, you'll do it. Women, that wasn't the case. Like, and as far back, our grandparents.
It wasn't that far long ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
It takes so long for society to catch up to like the mentality of society, which is a bizarre thing to say, but it couldnly agree more, particularly for women.
You have this combination of like evolution and biology. You have the two imperative things, which are like, you have to pop out a baby by 30, which is literally physically part of us, where you're already thinking about it.
Don't stress about that.
I'm not popping out a kid anytime soon.
I'm just saying, like, I don't think, like, as a man, I can give you this advice, but being down the road with her, like, don't stress about it. It all works out.
Yeah. This is something, I mean, I feel like I have a little bit of a different approach with it, because my whole thing is I'm a writer, and it's not just for this dating stuff. I wrote a play, like there are other things. So I could picture a really cool, fulfilling life of travel and writing if I don't meet that person by that time without kids. My mother will kill me for saying this on camera, by the way. My friends, meanwhile, though, we're having these conversations, and like my roommate said to me the other day, she's like, I feel like I was put on this earth to be a mother. I don't necessarily relate to that. Like, I think I'd be a great mom. I don't know that I was born to be a mother. So if you feel that way and like your whole life, you're thinking of can't wait to have kids, it creates this kind of like, what's wrong with me? Why isn't it my time yet? Like, there's so much frustration where like a lot of my friends are ready to be at that point, and they just haven't met the right person yet. And I think it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a catch-22, because you go on the date, you're looking for your person, but you're not being playful, and then it's too much pressure.
Because you're just thinking so heavily about the fact that you're ready and you're
I would just say, as somebody who's a little older, you have your ideal life and you have reality. Everybody wants their ideal life.
It's called a pipe dream.
And then reality hits you. And if you're not happy with reality, you'd never be happy with your ideal life. So whatever your reality is, embrace that and just be happy, because your friend at 27 who has what people think she should have, she might not be happy. But if you're happy, it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Again, completely understand where you're coming from, but it is a lot more nuanced being a woman than it is a male. Like, you can sit there and say that from a male perspective, and that's great. And that's
I just
wonderful.
think in life in general.
100%. And that's
we're getting specific to kids and marriage.
Yeah.
A man with his career, he could be 27 and be like, shit, I wish I was here in my career. But maybe the person that is where you want it to be is miserable and you're actually happy. So you're stressing about something that won't even make you happy. Why do you care about it so
Yeah.
much?
So, okay, I think this is a good tie-in. My favorite story I ever wrote was Soonacorn.
Okay.
Are we
We're in the
each
same fucking
other?
brain.
Get out of my
Soonacorn.
brain. Okay. We're in each other's brains because this is totally my parents, okay, let me back up. Soonacorn, anyone who is a tech bro or anyone venture capitalism will know that a unicorn is when a startup company reaches $1 billion or more. Soonacorn is something that I saw in, I don't know, a financial journal somewhere. And it's like that company is projected to reach $1 billion. It's not there yet. So I saw that in my writer brain and I was like, oh, that's a man. I was like, that is a man right there. So I saw the term, but then I'm like noodling on it and I'm like, okay, what is the best way to make this tie into dating? My parents, they met when they were 21 years old on the Upper East Side at a bar called Spanky's. They were living with both of their separate parents and, on Long Island, and they were in the city for the weekend. My dad was, I'm putting him on blast. My dad was like drunken buffoon and put rose petals on like my mom's car. And he was like annoying, but he was cute and she found him cute. Okay, he gets her number, he calls her and he tries to set up a date. My mom gets a call on the day of the date from my batshit crazy grandmother. And she goes, Jamie, I'm sure you're a very, very nice woman, but Richie has his license suspended right now. So you're going to have to pick him up. So my mom goes, picks him up for their first date, and he takes her to the porthole. Needless to say, they broke up then at Ellen's Stardust Diner in Times Square a few months after that. Then they get back together a year or so after that. Then they break up again at Ellen's Stardust Diner. This went on, I think.
Why
they
did she
broke
go
up,
the second time?
I think they broke
Don't
up
walk in.
and got together. They broke up and got together like four times. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were kids. They were babies. Neither of them knew what they were doing, knew what they wanted. Finally, when they got to 28 and they got engaged, it was like they were both in the place where they were ready to commit. And I think that this is something where people take TikTok advice and the rules too much to heart, where it's like you can have a great connection with someone and you can have chemistry, and commitment can be a completely different thing. And that to me is a lot more about timing and self-timing and where you're at in life.
I think we can relate to that so heavily. I think our relationship we were Soonacorns for the longest time because very similar to your parents, we were together for 6 months, broke up. And then kind of got back together for like kind of a month and then broke up. And then we broke up completely, no contact for 4 months, 5 months. And we had separated. We had gone, okay, so when we're not even thinking about this is the future. I think we both loved each other and there was so much chemistry and connection there, but we were like, maybe this is just not the right thing for us. And then we got back together. We met for coffee one day and it was just like very instant. Like it was the commitment and the chemistry together. It was the fact that
But it was no TikTok trends.
No.
It was screw TikTok trends. For me, it was actually tradition of what my grandparents told me. So my grandparents broke up when they were 21 or something, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, you guys broke up? Like, what? And they got back together. She had written me a really long email about why we should be together, and like she didn't want to give up on it.
This is just as we were breaking up.
And for some reason, I just thought back to my grandparents and I said, listen, I don't know what could happen in the future. And I really meant this. And she probably didn't think that I meant it in the time. I was like, I don't know what could happen in the future. We may cross paths again. We may get married one day. But right now, like, there's no way that the two of us can be together. And I always think back to that because while I was writing that, it happened. And I don't know if me writing it helped it happen, but something in me just thought, right now is not the right time. Eventually, it will be the right time. And I don't know when that the right time is going to be.
I feel like this is a lot of what I write about in dating, which is like if you are breaking up with someone, if you're getting out of a situationship, and like I always equate Soonacorn to a big question that women ask me all the time is, can you move from a situationship to a relationship? The answer is yes, but only if you're willing to detach from it completely. Like when you guys broke up, you didn't know
No.
that you were going to end up together. When my parents broke up, I mean, I could not be here today. They were going on other dates. They were seeing other people. And I feel like when you then finally do come back together, you're not having this mentality of, but maybe there's something else, or maybe there's something better.
100%.
You've kind of explored it. You really gave each other
the space to be able to do that. And I think it's like, because we had broken up and gotten back together so many different times that in part, I think the reason why I sent that email is because I was like, this is the natural progression. We break up and then we try to get back together. And one of us is always kind of the person that does the big gesture, right? And it helped so much when he was like, it's not, I don't know when it's going to be the time, but now is not the right time. And I was like, you know what? You're fucking right. Because there's so much work that I need to do individually. There's so much work that you need to do individually. And if we're ever to get back together, not the fact that that's on the cards, these are things that we need to do individually so that we're better people for ourselves. And then if we're better people for ourselves, then we'll be better in turn for each other. And I remember it was his birthday. And I'm like a very sentimental person. I send you fucking paragraphs on your birthday, right? And all I said was "Happy birthday, Joe."
Oh,
and it stabbed him.
And I was waiting for it too because I knew
you were waiting all day for it.
No, I was waiting months or like weeks for it. I was like, my birthday's coming up, so she's gonna send me something nice, and I'm gonna have the upper hand. So I'm gonna see what's going on here.
Like games.
But I lost hand.
Oh, yeah.
He lost it hand, and then he was like, and then he sent, and he was like, "Do you want to meet for coffee?" And I said, and I sat there and ummed and ahed about it for a second. I said, "You know what? Yeah." And it was that thing where we got together and we were like, so how's life? Like, what's everything going on? And he said all of these things that he had done. I could tell that his emotional intelligence was like eons apart. He could tell that I had done so much work to be like more stable and clear-headed and like all of these beautiful things. And it was just like beautiful. And then I also said to him, I'm moving back to Australia. I've lived in America for over 10 years. I'm ready to move home and spend time with my family and do all these kind of things. And he said, well, no, you can't.
Well,
and he was like, I'm going to marry you.
So I have the girl perspective and the guy perspective. For the girl, which I use it because more often than not, again, it's like you have women who are always wanting more of the commitment and the guy. I always go back to the reference of Lenny from Of Mice and Men who squeezes the puppy and kills it. That's what happens when you stay in a relationship, in a situationship with someone who's not ready. You're squeezing out all of the good stuff, all of the chemistry, all of the connection, all of the qualities that drew you to each other. And then it just becomes orbited by like this holy grail commitment. For the guys also, it takes a woman to leave for you to be like pawing at the window and being like, no, I miss you.
It really does.
Well,
And-
also,
Go ahead.
well, I was just like, from a guy's perspective, we don't like being told what to do. Every guy just like doesn't like being told to do. So for us to convince ourselves that it's worth it, it's like you're telling yourself what to do. And there was a big portion of my time with her where I was still figuring out who I was. And I was always thinking outside the box. I was like, okay, but I could be single and I could be like living this life. And I was like, the fact that I'm thinking that way is terrible. Like, why am I not so excited about the person
I think
I'm
you
with?
really fell prey to the grass is greener.
Yeah, I always
right?
thought like, I have this amazing person that if you told me this is who I'd end up with in life, that'd be it. But I was like, why am I still thinking about like other things? Now to this day, there is zero of that, which makes me so happy because if I would have stayed with her through the relationship situationship, it would have been like, oh, I convinced myself that this was it. I didn't know, but now I know.
You would have
Like, I
been
don't-
underlying happy. But I will say this, and I find that you've said this before, so I feel confident and comfortable in saying it. But like you've expressed to me that in that period of time, you're like, well, if I can get her, maybe there's somebody better that I can get.
Oh, I think most men, 95% of men, are so delusional with the quality of woman that they can get
100%.
that I remember when I lived here and I heard Emily Ratajkowski move to the West Village
He didn't.
This motherfucker.
and she was
didn't.
married to that guy.
The confidence
And
level.
I was
I
like,
saw him. Oh, I can't talk shit about him.
well, I was just like,
I forgot
oh.
we're recording.
Cut it out.
And like, again, this is kind of being playful, but kind of not. I was like, if I run into her on like the West Side Highway or something, like maybe she'll be interested in me. Like,
What a fucking
that's
loser.
how men think.
Okay, if women had even a morsel of that delusion, we'd be running the world.
Oh my God.
It's because
It is-
we don't live in that
When I
deluded
first moved to LA,
mentality.
one of the friends of someone I was living with was like, oh my God, you're so handsome. Like, how are you not dating like Kendall Jenner or something? And instead of just being like, ah, thanks, I was like, yeah. Like, why am I not dating Kendall Jenner?
Okay,
How do I get
think
to Kendall Jenner?
This is the best advice to give everyone while dating, Ben. You should be as deluded as you are. Like, you should be as deluded as a man.
All men should
Women, men, you should not. Men,
translate
figure
that
it out.
delusion to business because it works well there.
No, take away. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's
it does
true.
very
That
much
is
so,
true.
But you hit the nail on the head.
True.
Hit the nail on the head, Sydney. For women, be as delusional as Joe.
Yeah, be as delusional.
As Joe in his late 20s, early 30s. Like that is the best. Even just take a smidge of that and you'd be so successful and you'd be so self-assured because it comes back. Well, it's really bit you in the ass for a little bit, but like it's come to the point
It
now.
didn't
where,
beat me in this because internally I was so delusional and confident that.
But confidence is attractive. Like, I have my best guy friend.
But I wouldn't tell people this.
No, but like
know?
he would look in the mirror or
Now
like
I can.
my best guy friend will send me, he was going to a wedding. He'll send me a picture of him like all dressed up. He'll be like, I'm best looking man in the room. If a woman walks in with that same confidence, she probably is the best looking woman in the room. And the confidence that you emit when you walk in with it, the strut, it's like, that's also part of what's going to get guys to come up to you.
And there's that thing of like, fake it till you make it. I'm not saying fake who you are, but like, look at yourself in the mirror before you go on that date, before you walk into that room and be like, I am the fucking hottest chick alive.
100%. But that to a guy, you think it's simple. It works. You get 10 times hotter when you play that card. And if I'll tell this to all the women out there, if a guy breaks up with you, just say this to him. Say, if you dated Kendall Jenner for a week, she'd chew you up and spit you out. Like, that is a fact.
Would she though? I feel like she's very docile.
I feel like
my
she
sister,
would chew you up and spit you out.
I don't know. My sister works for a modeling agency. I could hook you up back in the day. She's like, and she says she's very docile. I think Emily Ratajkowski would.
I don't mean it in those terms. I mean it in the sense of this.
I want to see him try and do it now. Like
I kind of do. Well, see, like
but think about this.
Met her and I've shot with her before, and then when he found that out, he was like,
"Yeah, I want to see him go up to bat
this.
And do it."
Let's go in an alternative reality here. Alternative reality. Right, we go on this virtual hiatus, and I'm dating Emily Ratajkowski.
Okay.
I would be so insecure and stressed every second of my life because she'd be walking down the street, and every guy would be DMing her, hitting on her, and I'd be like, no, that she's with me and no one's gonna give a shit.
Yeah, but you like a bit of a balance of that because when we go out to bars and men hit on me, you love it. You think it's great.
Oh yeah, because I'm married to you. But when we were single, it was the same card.
Liked it, yeah.
Well, I mean, not single. We were together, but
if you're dating someone in a band, do you want to date the lead singer or do you want to date the drummer?
Drummer.
Always. Drummer.
I like he's
why?
Because
who do you want to date? He doesn't know.
In a female band?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a female punk rock band.
Equate it to what
Taylor Swift, the lead singer.
No, shut up.
Are you a Swiftie?
It's huge.
It's ridiculous. Nothing against Swiftie.
You're full of contradictions.
He really is. He's a massive contradiction.
See, that's a green flag. I am who I am.
Yes, you are, darling.
I am who I am.
And I fell in love with every single
And I like Taylor Swift, and I'll sing it to the guy.
The drummer, because they're the sexiest fucking, they got great arms. But it's more so the fact that they're in there, they're like part of what's going on, but they're a little bit more in the background. People are not sliding into their fucking DMs. That lead singer is getting his dick sucked at every fucking stop.
I could never, ever in a trillion years date a lead singer. Ever. I would be up all night. I would never sleep.
He was always like, remember when we first started dating, he was like, why aren't you dating someone famous? I was like, because you couldn't fucking pay me to date someone famous.
Never.
Not a chance.
Too much pressure.
Way too much pressure. Way too much like scrutiny. Way too much like people sitting there saying like
you could Google Hannah and her paparazzi photos will come.
Can you just not?
What do you mean? You have paparazzi. Oh,
yeah, and it's just like I just dated this fella, and like even I got like a little brief smidge of it, and I was like, absolutely not, absolutely not.
I can't even play the fantasy game of like Brad Pitt, Jake Gyllenhaal. I'm like, I would be stressed.
You're like,
I can't even think about that. That is a stressful. That's not like a fun thing.
See, my theory was this: if I was in that situation at like the Met Gala or something, then that's my introduction to the world. Wait, no, listen, this is my introduction to the world. Then I could break up with him, and then everybody wants to be with me.
Oh, yeah, but that's very opportunistic, and I don't like that at all.
I'm saying if it didn't work out.
But I'm saying, but that doesn't speak to your personality. You're not that type of person.
This is the alternative.
You're the business behind this podcast.
This is the alternate reality, immature 20s Joe. This is not the married, mature business Joe.
Oh, so I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that we were dealing with two different versions of
I can't go to the Met Gala now.
Why not? We can do it.
No.
Sweetheart, have that delusional confidence. We can do whatever the fuck we want.
I think that Well, it's interesting that you say that because so much of what I write about, like my little niche of what I've started doing is taking financial theories and applying them to dating. Because as much as, you want to feel the vibe, you want to feel good about yourself, if you're a good investor, if you're someone who's making a shitload of money, you have a level of confidence and delusion that things are going to work out. If you're looking at long-term investments, how things are going to go in 10 years, you have a certain level of vision that other people can't see. The same goes for dating. Like if you're able to envision a future with someone that maybe they can't see, that's fine. I would hold on to that in your back pocket. Like I wrote about this in Soonacorn. Shit.
I might have it written down here, but
I agree
I
with
should
you.
have printed these out. There was a certain term that I use where it's like, if you see an investment is worthwhile and you see it's something that, it could give you great returns, you don't want to jump at it all at once. You want to hold it for a little bit, wait for it to reach maturity. The same goes for dating. Like put your money elsewhere while you're waiting for it. Maybe there's a better stock that comes up. You forget about that other one. But it's like, if you see it, keep it in your back pocket. Don't squeeze everything out of it.
honestly, I hate to say this, but I was
Well, I was gonna say, if you meet somebody with a vision that's a very,
it's crazy.
very, very
Really? Oh my God. When you're
rare
doing it.
quality, and it's special when people have visions and think long term and see things other people can't. So if you're dating somebody and they're not where you want them to be at that moment, but they have a really big vision, hold on to that.
Yeah.
I am so sad that this podcast is over because we say this sometimes and sometimes I say it a bit facetiously, but I truly mean it this time. Like we could have talked for hours and hours. I had so many. No, but the fact that I had so many questions and you just you kind of answered them as you were speaking was such a beautiful thing. It makes my job very easy. But I have a very strong suspicion that we'll be continuing these conversations over many dinners in the near future, considering the fact that we're now New Yorkers.
Neighbors.
But as we wrap up, we always like to ask our guests to let our listeners know where they can find them.
So I am like the anti-person to be on a podcast. I'm private on Instagram, but Sydney Meister, pure wow. I write. I'm a writer.
Honestly,
so at Pure Wow,
so
they can find your article.
If you're into dating theories, like you said, the kind of crossover between business and the business analogies for dating, Sydney is your gal. And also look at Cupid's Corner on TikTok because that was kind of very cute and very funny when I was.
They stalled a little bit, but yeah, we might pick them back up.
I think you should even just go dive into the old episodes because they're really good. But darling, would you like to do your outro?
Yes, thank you guys for listening. Check out one of our past episodes. Subscribe. It helps us out so much. We'll see you next time and happy dating.
Bye.